So we're really excited to be hearing from two Pride Employee Resource Group co-chairs from the global workplace and facility management company ISS. ISS operates in over 30 countries and employs over 350,000 people, and they're also an ambassador company to Heart of the City and support our small businesses. We'll be hearing from Arno, who is the UK Pride ERG co-chair, and Ben, who is the Global Pride ERG co-chair, and they'll be able to better introduce themselves in a second. Earlier, I mentioned how Heart of the City supports businesses be better for the climate through our climate and our responsible business programme. So although in today's session we're going to talk a lot about the UK and UK employee experiences of being LGBTQ+, it's important to mention that we know that LGBTQ+ individuals who are living in the global south are most likely to feel the impacts of climate change. They are often the most marginalised from society and therefore vulnerable to climate risks. In addition, we know that climate change is causing increased migration worldwide, and LGBTQ+ asylum seekers fleeing regions affected by climate change may struggle to find safe refuge, particularly in countries with discriminatory laws of practices. So this context is important to today's Lunch and Learn because I think we really need to have this at the back of our minds, that as we listen to today's speakers, pride and fostering an inclusive environment isn't just a nice to have, and it's something that we should be striving for, not just in the UK, but globally. So with this background, I will pass over to our speakers to talk more about pride, inclusion, and share some actions we can all take away to create a more inclusive working environment for everyone. So over to Arno and Ben.
Thanks, Olivia. So hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having us today on your Lunch and Learn. I'm going to kick off with a bit of an introduction to ISS and myself, and then kind of Arno and I will tag team through the rest of the slides, just to give you a bit of a sense of who we are, what we do in our kind of roles as co-chairs on the ERGs, some of the things that have gone well and some of the challenges that we've kind of faced over the last couple of years in this space. So just to start, ISS, we're a global facilities management company. So that means we do a lot of the services that typically are outsourced by other organisations. So we provide cleaning services, catering, security, and those kind of behind the scenes type roles. Across the world, we operate in all of the industries you can think of. So we've got customers in the banking sector, professional services, lots in healthcare and education. And I think just to, I guess, bring it to life for you as audience to this, you might see some of the ISS employees if you ever get on the DLR in London. We run all of the kind of revenue protection officer roles. So if someone ever comes up to you and says, please, can I see your ticket? That would be an ISS employee. If you ever peruse around the Barbican, we run all the security services there. So they are the officers that you'd see on site there, all ISS employees. If you ever fly in or out of Gatwick or Heathrow, for example, they are contract, and all the cleaners at those two airports are ISS. And if unfortunately you end up in hospital in London, in like Newham or on the Fulham Road collective hospitals, South London, Maudsley, or in the north in like Derby or Coventry, the cleaning and porters and those hospitals are all ISS employees. So we've got lots and lots of people all over the UK. And they're the types of places, I guess, just as Joe Blogs, normal citizens would perhaps see some of our people around. Sometimes we're in ISS uniform, sometimes they are not and they're in customer uniform. So sometimes really present, sometimes really hidden. But my role is a central function in our supply chain and procurement team. So I'm our sustainability manager in that space. And part of my job is to look at how are we diversifying our supply chain and working with more SMEs, smaller businesses, diverse owned organisations as suppliers to ISS. And that's fundamentally where the kind of link with Heart of the City comes, because we partner to sort of address that as a strategic agenda for our organisation. But then my, I guess, volunteer role aside of my desk role, which has come a very timely for this particular webinar, is that I am the Global Pride ERG co-chair. So as an organisation, we have 5 particular areas in the space of D&I that we focus on. Each of those has an ERG, which is an employee resource group or a network, kind of whatever you kind of want to term it as. And each of those 5 dimensions has an ERG at a global level and then at a country level as well. So I sit on our global group about that. And one of the things Olivia asked us to kind of just cover off in this is, in a very kind of short way, what does Pride Month mean to us and what's it about? And for me, I've put there that it's about an opportunity to be a visible ally. I think from, I guess, a personal perspective in terms of why I'm on the Pride ERG, overall, and why I've chosen Pride over any of the other groups that I could be part of, is that my sister is gay, and I remember her once telling us a story about how she was basically harassed in the streets of Edinburgh. And I think if it happens in the kind of cool student hip happening space of Edinburgh, then harassment is happening in the workplace. And if there's anything I can do to sort of even change the experience or make someone feel even the slightest bit safer in the workplace by being a visible ally and being part of the group, then yeah, that's a mission accomplished for me.
Hi everyone, so I'm Arno Leijten and work for ISS, and my day job is contract governance and strategy manager on one of our client contracts. That means that I ensure that what we've signed up to is in a contract we deliver, as well as the reporting to our client and within the organization, as well as drive the strategy of both the organization ISS as well as our client. So my voluntary role is the ISS UK Pride ERG chair, and that's for the UK, similar to what Ben does globally, but I just look after the UK, and that would include organising events for the ERG that are relating to Pride, as well as joining calls like this, and as well as providing support to people in the organisation and being there as a listening ear or there for advice. For me, Pride Month is about visibility and normalisation. The reason I joined the ERG and why I ended up being the chair is because I'm part of the community, and I've never experienced within ISS any discrimination for being gay. So why is it important as a business to have, to have Pride, to celebrate Pride in your business, and to make sure that you're open to this? And for me, that is like really point one. There is recruitment and retention of talent. It is, if you are a welcoming business, to me that means that people want to work for you, and they will come to you. They will remain with you, and you can get them to their creativity will flourish, because if they don't have to hide who they are, they can really transfer that energy of to being creative and being and being their best selves at work, and bringing themselves to work as well. Hiding who you are is difficult, and it costs a lot of energy. So if you don't have to do that, you're just your better self, I think. Is that Ben? Is that something that you would agree with?
Yeah, I think you can't recruit people who bring a wealth of experiences and backgrounds and diverse thinking and diverse approaches without having a culture that enables them to do that. And I think that's not exclusive to Pride, it's across sort of D&I as an agenda as a whole. And I think for us, when I think back to my first kind of introduction to diversity and inclusion when I first started at ISS, This was before we had anybody in a role dedicated to D&I. It's before we had a team around it. It was before we had any kind of strategy or anything like that. And the ERG is particularly kind of very much at the beginning of our journey. I realised that D&I is very much a way of protecting your business from a legal perspective as well. My first kind of introduction to this topic was through our employment lawyer at the time. And she was saying that she was constantly day in, day out, fighting discrimination cases, fighting harassment cases, bullying cases. It was costing the business loads of money in legal fees and settlements. And it was because of all of these cases that she was facing and having to deal with that she developed what was the beginning, I guess, in the origins of our internal D&I training. And that training was built around the 9 protected characteristics. And it was put in place with the aim of preventing discrimination ever getting to a place of where it required kind of legal intervention. So it wasn't only about doing the right thing for us, but it was also about protecting our business and preventing this discrimination and these legal issues coming across. So from a financial perspective, of course, but also from reputation, PR, and a looking after your people kind of perspective as well. So there's absolutely the business case to why diversity, inclusion and pride, for the purposes of this conversation, are pertinent to engage with from a business perspective. So we've come up with kind of 4 actions here that we were going to talk through about what you can do to sort of celebrate Pride, take part in Pride Month, or address Pride as a topic throughout the year. Don't feel that this is limited to only recognising within Pride Month. But I think the first thing to say, I guess, is despite the fact that I introduced this saying we're a part of a huge organisation, we've got lots of people invested in this, we've got global groups, we've got a global lead, we've got a global strategy. The ERGs that Arno and I are very much kind of ground bottom up kind of grassroots type approach to Pride. I think neither of us would ever say that we're experts in this space. And I think that it's being part of an ERG that has helped me develop as an individual in this space, but has also helped the organisation develop in this space. And I still kind of don't feel, despite being part of an ERG for a number of years, that I am kind of warranted to lead on this topic. But it's definitely been a space where I've been able to learn a lot, and I guess, support people who have been faced challenges within the workplace in that kind of space. Arno, would that be your experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. When I joined, I wasn't really sure really what an ERG, especially within ISS, what they were doing. So I had to learn that. But at the time, Kat Parsons, I don't know if anyone have come across Kat on LinkedIn, was with ISS, and she was really she really sold it to me as in like, we need you on this ERG, and that's why I also joined, and I was like, wow, okay, great, this is something that I really want to support. And whilst in ISS we call it an ERG, so the Employee Resource Group, but in other organizations it could be a employee committee or an employee network. So it has different names, I guess, across different organizations, but I think the aim, it can be small as well as large networks, but I think the aim for this is really just to get people together and who want to make a difference within both the organization as well as in society, and together you can create that sense of community and or a safe space for people, and for people to be themselves, share their stories, or just listen in to what is happening in the space of Pride, but it could also be another topic, like another anything else. And then it's just to create that kind of that culture at work where where people want to talk about about maybe challenges they face, or and what they can do about solving that, and coming there for advice, and really want to bring that change and normalize, like what I said earlier, normalize this within the culture at work. And I guess there's also, you know, the visibility. You can, you know, it's something that you might not know about someone that's part of the community, and you just want to make them feel like, you know, it's accepting and it's a safe space for them, and being part of an employee network or an ERG, and making that visible, that you're visible in that group. That is it can make such a change for someone to be themselves. Just those subtle things, or subtle anything that you can do, that they know that they can be themselves. That's for me really what an ERG stands for. It's that safe space for everybody, LGBTQ plus members as well as allies.
And we have separate ERGs for each of the kind of different areas within D&I, but recognise not every organisation has enough employees to warrant having 5 or so separate groups. And actually, there's an argument to say that a sort of committee or network that looks at D&I more broadly is as equally as valuable, because there's so much sort of intersectionality between each of the different D&I dimensions, that while you don't need to have a standalone group that focuses solely on Pride, for example, it might be that LGBTQ plus is the theme of that group for Pride Month. But throughout the year, it's absolutely fine just to have a kind of small group of people who want to discuss and engage in D&I more broadly, because of the intersectionality between race and LGBTQ, for example. So it's absolutely, yeah, it's equally as valuable to have those conversations within the same groups and the same people.
Absolutely, and I think you can really foster that, and you can bring that out of people with organising. What we do in ISA is organising little events and invite people to that. And we organise that in the ERG, and with people from the ERG. And right now with Pride Month, we've got an event every week that we invite people to, and it's not just in the offices, the ISS offices, but we invite people across the UK to join digitally, or even organise their own events in client spaces, client offices. And you know, you could create big events where you can where you have almost like external speakers coming in, or have parties, or after work you can go, you can have some work drinks, but it can also be really small events. You can have a webinar, you can have a book club where you share books relating to the topic, and not just Pride, but any of the other ERG related topics. So yeah, it's really it really is up to the organization of what you can organize. And in a bigger organizations, you might be able to organize a lot more, but in smaller ones, it's the smaller events that really count.
And that's a perfect little segue actually into action number 2. If we could go on to the next slide, is around working with other external sort of partnerships, organisations, charities in this space. I've listed a couple there as just examples, but there's so many different organisations out there that do have expertise in this space that can support you as a business and as an individual. Stonewall is probably the most renowned and well-known organisation, but then there's other smaller organisations that might focus particularly on like mental health in the LGBTQ plus community. And I guess the reason that was a nice segue for me is that partnerships, I guess, have given me 2 really useful takeaways from engaging with them. And one of them is the opportunity to join their events. So if you don't have time, capacity, engagement to organise your own event type thing for Pride, then capitalising on what other organisations are doing is probably the second best to that. And all it takes is kind of getting on the mailing list of these types of businesses and charities that you'll end up invited to, both kind of in real life, yeah, and virtual events. So that's been great, and I guess comes with events comes with this sort of networking opportunities and options to build relationships with other businesses and peers in this space. So that's been takeaway number one from partnering with external organisations. And the other piece that's been hugely valuable from an internal perspective is the materials that they often produce. There's a whole kind of wealth of lots of different templates and training materials and guides and so on and so forth that you can find from all different organisations. And if I'm honest, it's a little bit overwhelming sometimes because there is so much out there. And the hard thing is that using one version or one organisation's over another is not right or wrong. It's just kind of what resonates with you and your organisation. But the fact that there is a sort of basis to use as a starting point if you're thinking about putting together any kind of collateral to use internally, that's been, yeah, invaluable to kind of lean on those sort of external experts to take that from them. And the last point there is just, I'll flag the sort of signposting piece. As an ERG, while we can support individuals and other people in the business based on our own personal experiences, we're not mental health professionals. We can only provide pastoral care in the sense anybody can. So just having one or two organisations that we know are out there externally to act as sort of a signposting place if people really are struggling is definitely something to sort of have in your back pocket as well. Thank you.
I think I've already touched on some of this on my previous slides, but it's, you know, another action that you can do is the Pride events and activities that you can do in your organisation. I touched on it, external speakers or book clubs, but other ideas that you can do is add pronouns to signatures. It's a little really subtle change, and a lot of people will probably not even notice it, but for people where it means something, they will definitely notice it. And it's something that it fosters that welcoming environment to know that people, you know, that you thought of that and you added that to your signature and that you took time to do that. So that subtle things that you can do, and you know, other things I'll mention here is a quiz. You know, it's fun. It's easy to set up. You can do it online, but you can also do it in person, and it's really engaging and gets people together and gets people talking.
And then the last action that we've got here is around kind of measuring, getting your baseline and benchmarking kind of where you're at and what you want to achieve. It's very much, I guess, based in the principle of what gets measured gets managed. If you've got some qualitative and quantitative sort of stats and numbers to underpin what you're trying to achieve in the D&I and Pride space, then it's a way to inform your decisions and work out whether you are changing the culture, improving the culture around this. Fundamentally, I guess, quantifying and measuring LGBT is difficult. It's very personal to people. So I guess it's always best to sort of take a bit of a quantitative approach because it enables people to be anonymous in the process. And that is simply asking about people's sexual orientation, people's gender identity, and all kind of that, I guess, piece of demographic questions. But it's also important to get the qualitative feedback and experiences from people. I guess, it's very much about asking what the lived experiences people are having, because I think what we found is that as a business, we can absolutely take a position on our sort of zero tolerance to discrimination. We can absolutely have a position on creating inclusive culture. We can have all the policies that back that up. We can have all the guidance for our managers that can back that up. But understanding whether that is translating into the lived experience of our employees can sometimes present a different picture. So that's why it's quite important to have both sort of numbers and statistics that go behind it, but also a reflection of the voices of your people as well. And I've popped a couple of points there about how to gather that information. It's nothing groundbreaking, it's nothing different. It would be all the typical ways that you'd expect to gather information about your staff. And there's no right or wrong way of doing it necessarily. I guess it's just about tapping into existing touch points with your employees and having this as an agenda item in there. So yeah, your sort of standard surveys, your onboarding information, people are often more inclined to volunteer that information at onboarding because they still want to sort of please their employer. But I think more as we're getting into a space of where people are understanding why we're asking these questions, we're getting more of our workforce disclosing that, but there will always be a proportion of people that don't feel comfortable for whatever reason. And that kind of goes back to the qualitative side of it and the lived experience side of it, is that you want to create a culture where people understand and feel that they can disclose this type of information, so that you've kind of got that baseline and that data to work with to inform sort of decisions and strategies and going forward. And then I've just got this last point here, just in case you're sort of still sitting here wondering whether diversity and inclusion is something you should even consider, whether it's something you should be doing for the LGBT community. This is a quote on the screen here that quite a senior person in our Poland office once said to me. She said, "We don't have any LGBTQ people here. They've got an office of a couple of hundred people," just to sort of provide the context there. And my two takeaway points to that is, don't assume, because needless to say, that person was wildly inaccurate in what she thought of her workforce. We have an absolute thriving community of LGBT people there. We have a really active Pride group. So you can never assume who is and isn't part of your workforce more broadly. And the second piece, if that statement were to be true about your organisation, and if you are striving to have a diverse workforce for all of the kind of business case reasons that we talked about before, then engaging in Pride is even more needed, so that you can create an organisation and a culture and a workforce that does welcome people into your organisation. If there's a proportion of of people in society more broadly who identify as a particular demographic, then our workforces should be reflecting that.
Thank you very much, Ben and Arno. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. And now is the chance for our audience to ask some questions. Please don't be shy. We've had a few that have come through in the Q&A, which I will facilitate. You can also use the chat. I can do both. So the first question that has come in, and you slightly touched on it already, Ben, but is it acceptable to have general policies around equality and diversity and a culture of inclusion, or does LGBT anti-discrimination need to be dealt with separately? I guess it's more, inclusion as a whole. Do you have to be quite specific about LGBT?
So at the very least, I would say that we absolutely should have inclusion as a whole type policies as a starting off point. And this is a space where we are also trying to move to, is what do we need that either sort of supplements or supports those broader inclusion policies, specifically on not only LGBTQ, but each of our D&I dimensions, because the challenges that people face will be slightly different and slightly nuanced, and how the business wants to manage and respond to those may be different depending on the kind of agenda and topic that we're talking about. So yes, I would say, and this is an opportunity to engage if you can, and if you're from an organisation that has a sort of space to do this, engage people in the community to understand what it is that the challenges they're facing, or what they need to see reflected in a policy. Don't feel that you've kind of got to guess what that looks like from a sort of HR or central perspective. So it's an opportunity, and I guess a platform to engage people in what does that sort of supplementary piece of policy or guidance need to look like.
I think an example for that supplementary policy is I'm currently working on that myself in the UK, is a transgender policy. So we have the broader policies in place, but we're going to have one for that is just focusing on that and how we can support people that are transgender as an organisation to specify a little bit broad, or to add on and specify.
And another policy that we've been working on this space is our parental leave policy. So we had quite archaic policies, if I could describe it like that. And I remember one of our colleagues, actually our former head of D&I think she had to invoke the paternity policy because she was in a same-sex couple with child, and that just wasn't the right approach to this. So they've been working on how to develop the parental leave policy to be much more gender neutral and much more equitable across all genders, and particularly those who don't identify as male or female. It's kind of posed some challenges, and how do we word that? How do we get the language correct? How do we get the rights reflected in those policies? So that's kind of the nuances that you can see coming through with general policies that reflect LGBTQ people.
Brilliant, thank you. And we didn't say it earlier, but for those who are I can see in the chat that there's one business that is screening this to their employees, which I think is fantastic. So please do use this Lunch and Learn as a kind of springboard to start those conversations in your offices if you haven't had them before. So well done, more too. The other question that's come in, so I think people are often nervous around terminology and the language they should use, and they don't want to say the wrong thing, and therefore they sometimes don't engage. We were discussing about this earlier, actually. LGBT versus LGBTQ plus versus LGBTQIA. What language would you recommend people use? Because it is quite tricky to navigate.
Go on, Arno, tell them how many letters exist.
Last time I checked, it was 32, I believe, but it could have changed by now. It was some time ago. But I think language in general is just be respectful. Be respectful for everyone. I think that goes without saying, but I'll mention it anyway. But within ISS in the UK, what we've opted for is LGBTQIA plus, because that includes the A that we've included as allies, because we have allies in the ERG, and we wanted to give them space. Now the A in other organizations might stand for something else, so it's not really set. There is a variety of ways to include it. So as long as it's respectful, I don't think anything is wrong to use. And I think also with this could be quite a current theme is that if you misgender someone, for example, it's one of the things that someone advised me on is if you do that, apologize and move on, don't linger, just and just try to do the right thing and do the gender them in the right way later on. So that is one of that's what I would advise, really.
And in terms of understanding what each of those letters stands for and means, I would refer you to Stonewall, who have an excellent guide on debunking the acronym of LGBTQIA.
Brilliant, thank you. I wanted to go back to your first tip, which was about starting that employee resource group or having a committee or a network. At Heart of the City, we really encourage our businesses to have some sort of committee that brings together lots of people and discuss responsible business or sustainability or diversity inclusion. Those on the call, I'd be really interested if you do have a committee that exists where you do have the chance to discuss diversity and inclusion issues or concerns. Be really interested if you could just say I have one in the chat, just out of interest, where it exists in small businesses. But keen to hear your views, Arno and Ben. So I'm in two minds. I have heard some people say you 100% need senior leaders on these committees for things to happen. And then the other view is you don't necessarily want the senior leaders because you want that safe space where you can discuss, because sometimes some of the issues are from the senior leaders. So just interested in your kind of setup of the ERGs and your views on senior leader engagement.
I think first and foremost, senior leaders might want to be part of the ERG, not in their senior leadership capacity, if that makes sense. So I think that has to be recognised, that people might want to be part of the committee or the group from that perspective. But then the model that we kind of work with is a group open to anybody who wants to join, regardless of where they sit in the organisation, the role that they have. But we do have senior leaders who sponsor each of the ERGs, and we engage with them typically on a more like quarterly basis. So then we provide them with an update on what the ERG is up to, or if we're facing any barriers in terms of like getting a policy signed off, for example, or engaging a sort of team in the agenda. Whatever the challenges are, we kind of use them as our sounding board and, I guess, opening doors to the rest of the business. So yeah, we don't invite the sponsors to every single meeting in their sponsorship capacity, in their senior leader sponsorship capacity, but we do have them representing us at that kind of level.
Thank you.